What if I told you that the addiction you carry isn't weakness, but an invisible war happening inside you? Carl Jung discovered something disturbing. There's a dark force feeding on your vital energy, growing in the depths of your unconscious, waiting for the perfect moment to dominate you. We're not talking about lack of discipline or willpower. We're talking about a spiritual battlefield where your soul is being tested. Every time you give in, something beyond you grows stronger. And the scariest part, most people don't even realize they're being devoured from within. Jung called this possession by the shadow, a psychic entity that hijacks your will and turns you into a prisoner of your own mind. But there's a way out, and it begins when you understand that your addiction was never really yours. Get ready to discover the most hidden truth about addiction that modern psychology doesn't want you to know. There's something living in the basement of your mind that you've never met face to face. Jung spent decades studying this hidden part of human nature, and what he found changed everything we thought we knew about why people self-destruct. This isn't about being a bad person or making poor choices. This is about an autonomous force that operates below your conscious awareness, pulling strings you didn't even know existed. Think about the last time you promised yourself you'd stop. You meant it with every fiber of your being. You were convinced this time would be different. Then, almost like magic, you found yourself doing the exact thing you swore you wouldn't do. And in that moment, you probably asked yourself, who is really in control here? That question hits at the core of what Jung discovered. There's a part of you that doesn't want to heal. There's a part of you that fights against your own liberation. And that part isn't some abstract concept or philosophical idea. It's real, it's active, and it's working against you right now. When someone reaches for a substance that numbs their pain, they're not just seeking temporary relief. They're feeding something that lives in the darkness of their psyche. Every hit, every dose, every moment of escape strengthens this entity. It grows more powerful with each surrender. Jung observed that people who struggled with these patterns weren't weak or morally flawed. They were battling something that had taken root in their unconscious mind, something that had become almost alive in its own right. The shadow doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send you a letter saying it's moving in. It creeps into your life through the cracks of unprocessed pain, childhood wounds you never addressed, traumas you buried instead of healing. It finds the moments when you felt abandoned, rejected, or unworthy, and it builds its home there. Over time, it learns your weaknesses better than you know them yourself. It knows exactly when to whisper in your ear, exactly what to promise, exactly how to make you believe that one more time won't hurt. What makes this so terrifying is how intelligent it is. The shadow uses your own voice against you. It sounds like your thoughts, feels like your desires. You can't tell where you end and it begins. This is why people say they feel possessed during their worst moments. They describe watching themselves do things they don't want to do, as if they're spectators in their own lives. Jung would say they're absolutely right. They are being possessed, not by some external demon, but by a fragmented part of themselves that has gained autonomy. The substance or behavior itself isn't the real problem. It's just the tool the shadow uses to keep you trapped. Remove one addiction, and it'll find another. Stop drinking, and suddenly you can't stop eating. Quit gambling, and you're drowning in work. The shadow is adaptable, creative, relentless. It doesn't care what form the addiction takes. It only cares about maintaining control, about keeping you separated from your true self. Here's what most people miss. The shadow isn't trying to destroy you for the sake of destruction. It's trying to get your attention. It's screaming at you through the only language it knows, through compulsion and chaos. Every relapse is a message. Every moment of losing control is communication from a part of you that's been locked away for so long, it's forgotten how to speak normally. The addiction is the shadow's way of saying, look at me, acknowledge me, integrate me back into your wholeness. But you can't integrate what you won't acknowledge. You can't heal what you pretend doesn't exist. And this is where most people get stuck. They spend all their energy fighting the symptoms while ignoring the source. They white-knuckle their way through sobriety, using sheer willpower to suppress the shadow, never understanding that suppression only makes it stronger. What you resist persists. What you push down will eventually explode upward with greater force than before. The moment you stop running from the shadow, you come face to face with something even more frightening: emptiness. Not the peaceful kind of emptiness that monks talk about. This is the void that opens up when you realize you've been using addiction to avoid feeling what's really inside you. It's a chasm of unexperienced emotions, unlived life, and disowned parts of yourself that have been waiting in the dark for years, sometimes decades. Jung understood that humans will do almost anything to avoid confronting this inner emptiness. We'll work ourselves to death, scroll endlessly through feeds, binge entire series in one sitting, anything to avoid sitting still with what's actually happening inside. The addiction serves as a bridge over the void, a way to get from morning to night without ever having to look down into that darkness. But the bridge is an illusion. You're not actually crossing anything. You're just pacing back and forth on a platform suspended over an abyss you refuse to explore. This void isn't empty in the way you think. It's full of everything you've refused to feel. Every grief you didn't allow yourself to process. Every rage you swallowed because expressing it wasn't safe. Every terror that froze you in place as a child. Every shame that made you want to disappear. All of it is down there, waiting. And the addiction has been your way of never having to meet these feelings, never having to let them move through you and transform. People talk about hitting rock bottom as if it's the worst thing that can happen. But Jung would say, rock bottom is actually the moment of greatest possibility. It's when the bridge finally collapses and you fall into the void you've been avoiding. And what you discover there isn't annihilation, it's truth. The void is where your authentic self has been hiding all along, buried under layers of coping mechanisms and survival strategies. When you're in active addiction, you're not really alive. You're in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of existence while your real life waits for you on the other side of that void. The people around you can sense it even if they can't name it. They see you, but don't see you. They talk to you, but you're not really there. You've become a ghost haunting your own life, and the addiction is what keeps you in this liminal space between living and dying. The void asks a question that terrifies most people. Who would you be without your pain? Your identity has become so wrapped up in your struggle, your story, your addiction, that you genuinely don't know who you are underneath it all. This is why people sabotage their own recovery. Not because they want to suffer, but because suffering has become familiar. The void represents the unknown, and the unknown feels more dangerous than the known hell you're currently living in. What nobody tells you is that the void isn't trying to swallow you whole. It's trying to show you what you've been missing. Every addiction is a search for something that feels like home, like belonging, like wholeness. You're looking for it in all the wrong places because you don't understand that what you're seeking is on the other side of your fear. The void is the doorway, not the destination. But you'll never walk through it as long as you're clinging to the addiction as your safety rope. Jung believed that meaningful transformation requires a death and rebirth. You have to let the old version of yourself die, the one who needed the addiction to survive. And that death happens in the void. It's where all your false identities dissolve, where all your protective mechanisms break down, where you finally stop pretending and start being real. This process feels like annihilation because in a sense it is. The person you've been pretending to be has to die so the person you actually are can emerge. If you feel ready to dive deeper into your own mind and balance both your light and shadow, explore the Sim Method ebook. It's a practical guide that helps you awaken your inner strength in just 5 minutes a day. The link is waiting for you in the first pinned comment. One morning you wake up and realize you haven't made a real decision in months, maybe years. Your days follow a pattern you never consciously chose. You do things you don't want to do, say yes when you mean no, watch yourself make the same mistakes over and over, while a quiet voice inside screams for you to stop. This is what Jung meant when he talked about psychological possession. You haven't lost your mind, but you've lost something far more important, your will. Control is an illusion we all participate in. We tell ourselves stories about being the masters of our fate, captains of our souls. Then addiction walks in and reveals the truth. You were never as in control as you thought. But now you're not in control at all, and the difference is impossible to ignore. Your body craves what your mind rejects. Your hands reach for what your heart despises. There's a civil war happening inside you, and you're losing on both sides. What makes this loss of control so devastating isn't just the behavior itself. It's what it reveals about the foundation you built your life on. Everything you believed about yourself, your strength, your character, your ability to choose, gets called into question. People who've never experienced this kind of possession can't understand it. They offer advice that sounds reasonable on paper but misses the entire point. Just stop. Just choose differently. Just be stronger. As if you haven't tried 1,000 times already. As if willpower alone could defeat a force that operates beneath the level of conscious choice. Jung saw this pattern play out in countless patients. They would describe feeling like passengers in their own bodies, watching themselves do things they found abhorrent, unable to intervene. The rational mind knows what's right, what's healthy, what's necessary. But knowing doesn't translate to doing. There's a gap between awareness and action, and that gap is where the shadow lives and thrives. It's where your conscious intentions go to die, where promises to yourself evaporate like morning mist. The cruelest part is how this loss of control seeps into every area of your life. It starts with one thing, one substance or behavior. Then it spreads like an infection. You stop showing up for people you love. You miss opportunities you'll never get back. You watch your dreams shrink and fade while you tell yourself you'll get back on track tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week, next month, next year. Time passes in a blur of false starts and broken promises, and one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. This isn't about weakness or lack of discipline. This is about a fundamental split in your psyche. Part of you genuinely wants to heal, to grow, to live fully. Another part is terrified of what that would mean. So it sabotages every attempt at change. It creates circumstances that justify relapse. It brings people into your life who enable your destruction. It's working behind the scenes, pulling levers and pushing buttons, keeping you trapped in a cycle you can't seem to break, no matter how desperately you want to. The addiction becomes a thief that steals more than your time and health. It steals your future. Every day you spend controlled by something outside your conscious will is a day you don't get back. Relationships deteriorate. Opportunities vanish. Your body ages and weakens. Your mind grows foggy and slow. The person you could have become remains forever out of reach, a ghost of potential haunting the wreckage of wasted years. Yet even in this state of lost control, there's information. Jung would tell you to pay attention to what the addiction is controlling you toward or away from. What are you avoiding by staying trapped? What would you have to face if you were free? Often the addiction is serving a purpose you haven't acknowledged. It's protecting you from something that feels more dangerous than the addiction itself. Maybe it's protecting you from success and the responsibility that comes with it. Maybe it's protecting you from intimacy and the vulnerability it requires. Maybe it's protecting you from your own potential and the terror of what you might become. Beneath the chaos of addiction, underneath all the pain and compulsion, there's a signal trying to reach you. Jung called it the voice of the self, the deepest and truest part of who you are. It's been calling to you your entire life, but the addiction turned up the volume on everything else so loud you can't hear it anymore. Every craving, every urge, every moment of desperation drowns out that quiet, persistent voice asking you to wake up and remember who you really are. This calling isn't abstract or mystical in some vague sense. It's utterly practical. It's the feeling you get in rare moments of clarity when you remember what you actually care about, what genuinely matters to you beyond survival and escape. It's the dreams you had before life beat you down. It's the person you imagined becoming before you learned to settle for just getting through the day. The addiction exists partially because you stopped listening to this call, stopped believing it was real or possible or meant for you. Most people experiencing addiction feel like they're running away from something, and they are. But Jung discovered they're also running away from something they're supposed to be running toward. There's a destiny trying to unfold through you, a unique contribution only you can make, a life only you can live. The addiction is what happens when you turn your back on that calling and try to live someone else's life or no life at all. The compulsion fills the space where purpose should be. This is why addiction feels so empty, even when you get what you want. You chase the high, the relief, the momentary peace, you get it, and within minutes or hours you're empty again, already craving the next fix. Nothing satisfies because you're feeding the wrong hunger. The addiction is trying to fill a need that can only be met by answering your calling, by aligning your life with your deepest truth. Everything else is just noise and distraction. The calling asks you to become who you actually are, rather than who you think you should be. It asks you to shed the false self you constructed to please others, to stay safe, to fit in. That false self is exhausting to maintain. It requires constant energy and attention. The addiction often begins as a way to cope with that exhaustion, to find relief from the burden of pretending to be someone you're not. But it ends up creating a prison far worse than the one you were trying to escape. What the calling offers isn't ease or comfort. It offers meaning. It offers the sense that your life matters, that you're here for a reason, that your struggles serve a purpose beyond just survival. Jung believed that neurosis and addiction often resulted from a loss of meaning, from lives that had become hollow at the center. People could endure incredible hardship if they believed it meant something, but they fell apart under minor stress when their lives felt pointless. Ignoring your calling creates a kind of spiritual pressure that builds over time. It's like damming a river. The water has to go somewhere. If it can't flow in its natural direction, it floods and destroys everything around it. Your life force, your creative energy, your passion and drive, when they can't flow toward your authentic purpose, they turn inward and become destructive. They become the compulsion, the obsession, the addiction that eats you alive from the inside. The terrifying thing about the calling is that answering it requires you to change everything. You can't keep living the life you've been living and also become who you're meant to be. Something has to give. Usually many things have to give. Relationships that no longer serve you, jobs that drain your soul, habits and patterns that keep you small and safe. The calling asks for nothing less than complete transformation, and that feels like death to the person you currently are. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. The addiction is already transforming you. It's just transforming you into a smaller, weaker, more broken version of yourself. You're changing either way. The only question is whether you're going to change in the direction of destruction or in the direction of growth. The calling is still there, still waiting, still patient. It will never stop trying to reach you. But every day you ignore it makes the signal a little fainter, a little harder to hear through all the noise. Stand in front of a mirror long enough and you'll see two people staring back. One is the person you recognize, the one shaped by choices and circumstances and all the ways you've tried to survive. The other is a stranger, someone you might have been, someone you still could be if things were different. Jung understood that addiction intensifies this split until you're living in a state of constant internal warfare, exhausted by a battle that never ends. This isn't about good versus evil or higher self versus lower self. It's more complicated than that. You've become someone you never intended to be through a series of compromises so small you didn't notice them happening. Each one made sense at the time. Each one felt necessary, but they accumulated like sediment at the bottom of a river, layer upon layer, until the original shape of who you were got buried completely. Now you're trying to live as this constructed person, while your authentic self pounds on the walls of its prison. The addiction serves both sides of this battle in different ways. It helps the false self maintain control by keeping you numbed out and disconnected, but it also expresses the rage of your authentic self at being denied and suppressed. Every act of self-destruction is simultaneously an act of protest. You're punishing yourself for betraying who you really are, and you're punishing the world for demanding that betrayal in the first place. The addiction is both weapon and wound. Most people spend enormous energy trying to reconcile these two versions of themselves. They want to keep the safety of the false self while accessing the aliveness of the authentic self. Jung would tell you this is impossible. You can't serve two masters. You can't live two lives simultaneously. At some point you have to choose which person you're going to be, knowing that choosing one means the death of the other. This choice is what makes recovery so difficult. It's not just about stopping a behavior, it's about ending an entire identity. The false self knows all your weaknesses because it was built from them. It knows exactly what fears to trigger, what insecurities to exploit, what narratives to spin to keep you trapped. It sounds like reason and practicality. It tells you to be realistic, to not expect too much, to accept your limitations. It's the voice that says you're too old, too damaged, too far gone to change now. And it uses the addiction as proof of its claims. See, you can't even stop doing this one thing. How could you possibly transform your entire life? But your authentic self speaks a different language entirely. It doesn't argue or explain. It simply shows you glimpses of what's possible. A moment of genuine joy, a flash of creative inspiration, a connection with another person that feels real and unguarded. These moments terrify the false self because they reveal that another way of being exists. They prove that the prison walls aren't as solid as you thought, and they create a hunger that no addiction can satisfy, a longing for a life that feels true. The battle intensifies when you start making changes. The false self fights hardest when it senses it's losing control. This is why people often relapse just when things start improving. It's not weakness or bad luck. It's the last stand of an identity that's dying. And dying identities, like dying animals, become most dangerous in their final moments. They'll do anything to survive, create any crisis, sabotage any progress. They'd rather burn everything down than surrender control. What makes this battle so exhausting is that you can't win it through force. You can't destroy the false self through effort and willpower. Jung discovered that transformation happens through integration, not elimination. The false self developed for a reason. It protected you when you needed protection. It helped you survive circumstances that might have broken you completely. Hating it, fighting it, trying to kill it only strengthens it. You have to understand it, acknowledge what it gave you, and gently, firmly choose to move beyond it. This requires a kind of radical honesty most people never achieve. You have to look clearly at who you've become without judgment or justification. You have to see all the ways you've betrayed yourself, all the compromises you've made, all the times you chose comfort over truth. And you have to do this without collapsing into shame or self-hatred. You have to hold yourself with compassion while also refusing to accept anything less than complete transformation. It's a razor's edge to walk, and most people fall off one side or the other. There comes a moment in every genuine transformation when the pain that's been destroying you suddenly reveals its purpose. Not the made-up purpose people assign to suffering to make it bearable, but the actual alchemical function of pain as the force that breaks you open so something new can emerge. Jung spent his life studying this process, watching people who'd been crushed by their addictions rise from the ashes as individuals he barely recognized, not because they'd eliminated their pain, but because they'd learned to let it remake them. Rebirth sounds beautiful in theory. In practice, it's messy and terrifying. You don't get to keep the parts of your old life that feel safe while shedding only the parts that hurt. You have to surrender all of it. Step into complete uncertainty. Trust a process that offers no guarantees. The addiction was your protection against exactly this kind of vulnerability. Now you're choosing vulnerability as your path forward. And every cell in your body screams that this is dangerous, that you should go back to what you know, even if what you know is slowly killing you. The power that emerges from this process isn't the kind you can show off or use to dominate others. It's quieter than that and infinitely more valuable. It's the power to be yourself without apology, the power to feel everything without being destroyed by it. The power to choose based on who you are rather than who you're afraid of becoming. People who've completed this journey carry themselves differently. They've stopped performing and started being. You can see it in their eyes. They've been to the underworld and brought something back with them. Jung understood that the energy bound up in addiction doesn't disappear when you stop the behavior. It transforms. All that passion, all that intensity, all that drive that was being poured into self-destruction becomes available for creation. This is why former addicts often become powerful forces for change. They've learned to channel energy that would terrify most people. They've developed a relationship with their shadow, integrated parts of themselves that others keep locked away. They have access to a power source most people never tap into because they're too afraid of what they might find in their own depths. The rebirth asks you to forgive yourself for all the time you lost, all the damage you caused, all the potential you wasted. This forgiveness isn't about letting yourself off the hook or pretending the past didn't happen. It's about refusing to let your past mistakes define your future possibilities. Every day you spend in guilt and shame is a day you're not available for the life trying to emerge through you. The person you're becoming can't be born from the same consciousness that created your addiction. You need new eyes, a new heart, a new way of being in the world. What transforms pain into power is meaning. When you can look back at your darkest moments and see how they shaped you, taught you, prepared you for who you needed to become, the weight of those experiences shifts. They stop being pure suffering and become initiation. You went through hell and came out the other side with gifts you couldn't have gained any other way. Compassion for others who struggle, understanding of human fragility, appreciation for ordinary moments of peace. These aren't small things. These are the qualities that make someone truly human. The final test isn't staying clean or sober, though that's necessary. The final test is whether you can take everything you learned in your depths and use it to live with purpose. Can you help others who are where you once were? Can you create something meaningful from your experience? Can you look at the wreckage of your past and see the foundation for a future that matters? This is what Jung meant by individuation. You don't become someone new. You become more fully yourself than you've ever been, integrating all the broken pieces into a whole that's stronger for having been shattered. Your addiction was never the end of your story. It was the middle, the crisis point, the moment when everything had to fall apart so it could come back together in a truer form. The person you are now, reading these words, carries scars that won't fully heal. But those scars are proof you survived something that destroys others. They're proof you're stronger than you knew. And they're proof that transformation, real transformation, is always possible for those willing to walk through fire to reach it. The battle isn't over, but you're no longer fighting alone, and you're no longer fighting blind. You know what you're up against now, and that knowledge, painful as it is the beginning of your freedom. Right now, in this exact moment, you stand at a crossroads Jung believed was the most important junction in any human life. Not the crossroads between addiction and sobriety, though that's part of it. The real choice is between continuing to live as a fragmented person at war with yourself or becoming whole for the first time in your life. One path is familiar, predictable in its misery. The other is unknown, and that unknown is what keeps most people trapped forever. Everything you've read here means nothing if you don't act on it. Understanding the shadow doesn't free you from it. Knowing about the void doesn't give you courage to face it. Recognizing your calling doesn't mean you'll answer it. The distance between knowledge and transformation is where most people spend their entire lives, collecting insights like trophies while their actual existence remains unchanged. Jung saw this pattern repeat endlessly. People who understood everything but did nothing with that understanding. The spiritual attack isn't just the addiction itself. It's the voice that tells you transformation is impossible, that you've gone too far, that you're the exception to every rule about human potential. That voice will use every weapon in its arsenal to keep you exactly where you are. It will disguise itself as reason, as self-protection, as wisdom learned from past failures. It will tell you that trying and failing again would be worse than not trying at all. But here's the truth that voice doesn't want you to remember. Every single person who ever broke free from the grip of addiction started from a place of hopelessness. They didn't have special advantages or secret knowledge. They simply reached a point where staying the same became more terrifying than changing. They made one choice, then another, until those choices accumulated into a completely different life. The power to do that lives in you right now, waiting for you to claim it. This isn't about perfection or never struggling again. It's about direction. Are you moving toward your authentic self or away from it? Are you feeding the shadow or integrating it? Are you answering your calling or drowning it out? These questions matter more than any single moment of weakness or strength. Your life is the sum of which direction you're facing, not how fast you're moving. The final test isn't whether you can overcome addiction. The final test is whether you can use everything the addiction taught you to become someone who makes meaning from pain, who turns wounds into wisdom, who walks through fire and comes out forged into something unbreakable. That person is waiting on the other side of your fear. The only question is whether you're ready to meet them.